Hello there! Welcome to episode 8 of the Hounds of Hübschdorf. We kind of left mid-game last time, so today you get to know the outcome of the game. We're treating you to 3 new chapters: The Winning Hand, a home game, and A Servant of 3 Masters. In the video, The Truth About Audio Epics Exposed! We told you there would be 10 episodes in total, but that was all a big lie. No, math was just never really my strong suit. There will in fact be 11 episodes in total, and the final episode will be premiered on January 2nd. So, you might want to subscribe and activate all notifications so you'll know when a new episode pops up. Also, there's a relatively new feature on YouTube that some of you have used already to hype our content. You can hype a video on your phone by swiping where the comments are under the video. So you swipe horizontally and a hype button should appear as one of the options. If it doesn't, it can help to like the video first. I wish I could show you how to do it, but I'm unable to reproduce it since it seems like the channels we watch don't qualify or we watch on TV or our desktop. And the hype feature has not yet been activated on the apps of those devices. Good news for our patrons as well. We adapted a short story written by Jack Douglas Horne, Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the Witching Savannah series, the Witches of New Orleans trilogy, and the standalone Southern Gothic horror tale Chivalry. The very appropriate title of this short story is December. We loved the atmosphere of the tale, and we had tons of fun adapting it into a dramatized audio production of around 40 minutes. It's available on Patreon for paying members from the Guardsman tier on. This is the $1 tier we've been promoting so often. For those who haven't yet, check it out. And if you love what you hear, make sure to check out Jack's other novels on his website. That is jackdouglashorne.com. Know that you can still purchase the 1 hour longer extended edition of the Hounds of Hübschdorf on Bandcamp or download it from Patreon if you join the Master Witch Hunter tier. That's the $10 tier. Come for the audiobook and stay for the epic merchandise. Or if you're just interested in the merchandise, we recommend you check out our Redbubble account. You can find all links in the description. Thank you for your comments, for liking and sharing, and know that it warms our hearts. But now let's return to the cold heart of Grauwald by the warm hearth in his damp cave in the 8th episode of the Hounds of Hübschdorf. The Winning Hand. Grauwald was now 11 squares removed from the abyss, Ludlov noted. He secretly wished the necromancer's next token would tell him to move his pawn another 6 squares ahead. At that point, just one more 5 on the white die would be enough to end the whole game. Grauwald would have to let Ludlov go and tell him where to find Tolfmann, if his word meant anything. Of course, Ludlov knew it would require a stroke of luck for him, or rather, a divine blessing. But it was possible. In any case, it was Grauwald's turn now, which allowed Ludlov to relax his muscles for a bit. His tension didn't ease, though. Things could still go wrong for him. He was still locked in Remnant Svensson's grip, and the effects of the potion seemed to be getting worse. Ludlov couldn't even feel anything from the waist down. Grauwald turned his token and read, "What is your favorite sin?" Ludlov hadn't properly listened to his words. All he had processed, with some disappointment, was that Grauwald had received a question, not an instruction. "I love the sins of the mind," Grauwald mused, "but I absolutely adore those of the deed. I'll wager you're a sinner of words, aren't you? Or sins of omission, perhaps. In any case, you're not a straightforward sinner. Am I right, Ludlov?
I believe this was your question, Grauwald. Besides, the token asked for your favorite sin, not a favorite category of sin.
Fair enough. That's easy. Usurpation.
Ludlov was a bit surprised by that. He'd expected Grauwald to pick something like murder or blasphemy, but this made perfect sense. Grauwald was telling him the truth.
Your turn,
the Dry Kunstler said in a bright voice. Ludlov wasn't looking forward to another turn, but he was hopeful, seeing how his finger was no less than 15 squares removed from Grauwald's tongue. He took the white die, quietly asked Sancta Gwendala for a blessing, and rolled it. 5. And on top of that, his pawn ended on a black token. Still, the gap between their pawns remained so wide that Ludlov didn't mind this outcome. The token read,
"Ever lusted for another."
Well, the truth, please,
Grauwald said, his eyes glinting at Ludlov's discomfort.
I have,
Ludlov admitted.
Before I met my wife, and afterwards. But not while she was in my life.
Grauwald frowned incredulously.
Didn't we promise each other we would respond to these questions honestly?
I did,
Ludlov assured him.
Yes, I've had my struggles with the sin of lust, mostly in my younger years before my marriage. Even now, I occasionally struggle with it. I'm not that strong. Evil has attacked me specifically on that front and almost destroyed me. But I don't credit my own strength for this. It was her. I know my marriage didn't last very long, but during that brief, blessed time, I can honestly say I simply didn't have the inclination to lust after other women.
Grauwald seemed angry, as if the answer offended him somehow. He took Ludlov's token and threw it away. Ludlov decided to ignore him. It was his game, after all.
Rubbish question. I'll come up with another one for next time. My turn now.
Grauwald grumpily picked up the black die and rolled it. Once more, he turned his token and told Ludlov his question.
When were you ever relieved you had crossed a line you hadn't crossed before? Oh,
his mood instantly brightened.
This is one of my favorite questions. I had the pleasure of hearing your witch hunter friend answer it on the day I started eating him. Would you like to know what he said?
Just answer the question, you filth!
Ludlov snapped. He desperately tried to forget about Grauwald's remark, but in his heart he couldn't help wondering what Brynjar's answer had been.
Murder,
Grauwald said simply.
Taking a human life. That was my line.
It sounded like he drew pleasure from every word.
For so many years, I drew the line there. And then I crossed it. What I felt then, I will remember it forever. I will treasure it forever. The power, the intensity. Lucas, what a revelation that was. Surely you must have felt it when you first killed someone, Ludlov.
This isn't my question,
Ludlov said, refusing to be goaded into revealing too much again.
Now give me that black die. I've had it with your disgusting stories.
Grauwald gave Ludlov the sort of look that doting parents reserved for their children's most charming moments.
I think your growling stomach is disturbing your temper.
Maybe I still have some scraps around here. Want me to check?
Ludlov shook his head curtly, dismissing the very suggestion. Grauwald shrugged and handed his opponent the black die. Wordlessly, Ludlov took it and rolled. 5 again. At least his finger landed on a white square this time. He knew he could handle those sorts of questions, and Grauwald was still 8 squares ahead of him.
Move back 3 squares, the token read. Thank you, Santa Gwendala,
Ludlov whispered as he followed the instruction and cheerfully turned over the white token where he landed.
Favorite location you've traveled to, he read.
Grauwald looked at him with keen interest. Ludlov had no idea why, but the deranged sorcerer seemed genuinely interested in his background and personality. In a way, this evil sorcerer was granting him more of his undivided attention than anyone else had in many years. He thought about the question. The southern Goldorian harbour city of Loinvu, known for its fine wines, beautiful women, and plentiful flowers, was the first place that popped into the witch hunter's mind. However, he didn't want to tell Grauwald about that, though. He associated the place with Chapelle, and he wanted to avoid telling his opponent anything about her. In any case, despite all of Loinvu's charm, Ludlov's favorite destination had always been Ringborg, the great walled city of the Untronian Empire, where he'd met Maria, still occupied a very special place in his heart. He hadn't returned there since her death. It was unlikely he ever would.
Ringborg, he answered. Where you met your wife,
Grauwald noted.
How mawkish of you.
So he knew that, Ludlov thought. How? He was sure he had never mentioned it. It was Grauwald's turn again, and Ludlov hoped the game would be over soon. 2 more unfortunate rolls for the necromancer, and it could all be over. Grauwald rolled a 2, which took his pawn as far as 3 squares removed from the black skull, which lurked mysteriously near the end of the game. The tongue pawn landed on a black token. That usually seemed to indicate some bad news for the player who reached it. Grauwald grabbed the black token, turned it around, and read it.
What is the first creature you remember killing?
Ludlov didn't know if he wanted to hear the answer.
Actually, I started off with something relatively big,
Grauwald boasted.
When I was 4, I killed a rat. I caught it, put my little shoe on its head, and began to play with its tail. I loved its little tail, but I must have played too hard. Suddenly there it was, that tiny little tail, right in my hand. The rat was bleeding and squealing. I think I pitied it, actually. So you see, I wasn't always heartless. I thought it would be better off dead than in pain. So I tried to stomp it to death, but that didn't quite work out. So I crashed one of my father's wine glasses and ground its shards into the rat's hide until the squealing stopped entirely. There was something thrilling about that bright red color on my hands. Some of the blood must have been mine with all those sharp glass edges. If it was, I didn't even notice any pain because the experience was so exhilarating. That was when I first learned who I really was. Of course, I'd killed lots of insects before, but that didn't do much for me. They don't even really feel anything as far as I know, and all that ever comes out of them is some nasty yellow pus. I suppose it was always about the blood for me. I remember the first time I squashed a mosquito that had
Ludlov just
fled.
remained silent and tried to ignore Grauwald's rant about the pleasures of killing small animals. He didn't know what to say. He reviled but also pitied this man. It was hard to imagine him as a toddler. When the necromancer finally stopped talking, Ludlov knew it was his turn again. He'd been lucky to land on a white token twice in a row. Now, however, he noticed that the next 8 squares were all filled with black tokens, except for the white one he'd already landed on in his last turn. He rolled a 1 and sighed in relief. Ludlov moved his finger 1 square and grabbed the black token. He took it, read it, and felt his blood freeze in his veins.
What is this?
He asked Grauwald in a hoarse voice.
What does it read?
Grauwald asked innocently.
Chop off 3 fingers or move 5 tiles. Well, a man of letters such as yourself should be able to understand a simple instruction, shouldn't he?
Grauwald commented breezily. Ludlov stared at the token in silence as cold sweat erupted all over his body. Grauwald was growing impatient.
Look, it's quite simple. You chop off 3 of your fingers or move your pawn ahead 5 squares.
He said with a shrug.
You can choose which fingers you're willing to lose. They can be from either hand, or both. It doesn't matter.
Ludlov swallowed. 5 squares was a lot. It would bring his pawn a lot closer to Grauwald's. But 3 fingers? He thought of his writings and his sketchbook and tasted something bitter in his mouth.
I would never cut off my own fingers,
he said defiantly, laying down the token with the other discarded ones.
It would give you far too much pleasure if I did. It would,
Grauwald admitted.
But I don't mind waiting. By the end, I'm rather confident I will be doing the cutting myself.
Ludlov clenched his jaw and moved his finger pawn 5 squares ahead. With every passing square, he felt his stomach twist and his spirits sink. He turned the token on the 5th square and hoped it wouldn't send him even closer to the abyss. But to his relief, he got a question again.
What was your worst decision of the past 3 years?
He fell silent, even though he didn't have to think about the answer. There were numerous candidates, but one very specific decision immediately came to mind.
Well?
Eventually, Ludlov answered with a heavy heart.
I convinced a young man to join me on a trip. It would give him a chance to meet up with his family. But he didn't survive the events that took place there.
Grauwald was clearly relishing Ludlov's guilt, like a vampire sucking on a carotid artery.
That's not all there is to the story, is it?
He intuited.
There's nothing more to say.
Grauwald wouldn't back down, though. He kept staring at the witch hunter expectantly.
I knew it was going to be dangerous, and so did he. I convinced him by promising him a large fee. Offered him money to die. And not even your own money, but the witch hunter orders. How cheap!
Ludlov bit his lip and looked down, guilt and disgust at war within him. He told himself it didn't matter. The goddess had forgiven him, and this man's accusing laughter was meaningless. He took a deep breath. 3 more squares would land Grauwald's pawn on the skull, whatever that meant.
Your turn,
Ludlov grunted, sliding the black die to his opponent. Grauwald gracefully accepted it and rolled a 2. His dried tongue now landed right before the black skull, and he turned the token.
Favorite kill? That's an easy one, he said. Besides that time I killed myself with fire, but that doesn't count.
Ludlov frowned. What did he mean by that?
The answer is my mother, of course,
Grauwald said with a satisfied smirk.
I remember the bewildered look on her face. Honey, what did I ever do wrong? I love you. Don't do this. Let's talk about this.
The dry Künstler couldn't control his laughter as he mocked his mother's voice.
She was always good at explaining herself. Nothing was ever her fault. So, I thought it was only fitting to cut out her vocal cords first. It was the first part I ate of her as well, by the way. I made her watch as she bled to death. She didn't have much to say about it, though. Nothing but a gurgle. It was the best line she ever spoke, that actress. Her whole life had been an act. And so, I gave her what every actress longs for. A tragic death scene.
Grauwald looked across the table with a self-righteous smirk.
How many men can say that they fulfilled their parents' dreams like that?
Ludlov stared at him. He simply couldn't fathom just how disturbed the dry Künstler's mind was. There was nothing he could say in response.
What if we insert a house rule here?
Grauwald suggested, as Ludlov stiffly picked up the black die.
If your finger pawn ends up in the same square as my tongue pawn, I get to taste your finger. Of course, I'll have to bite it off.
Grauwald chuckled at his own joke, and Ludlov wondered whether it was the wine that was causing this increased frivolity, or the prospect of winning the game. Ludlov squeezed the die in his hand. He hoped he would roll a 3 again and reach the next white token. He held the die close to his mouth and whispered a short prayer.
Please, Goddess, let it be a 3.
Then he let it go. 5 pips faced upward, which placed Ludlov's skeletal finger on a black token, right behind Grauwald.
You witch hunters are so superstitious. I see you praying and asking for blessings every turn. It doesn't seem to be doing you much good. Do you really think your goddess cares? To her, you're just one more deluded, expendable little slave. Do you think she listens to you because you're wearing a tall hat?
Grauwald's words didn't anger Ludlov. Rather, they made him reconsider for a moment. Perhaps it had been foolish to pray for a 3 on his die roll. Instead, he should have simply asked for help. Any kind of help the goddess was willing to grant him. Perhaps he hadn't rolled a 3 because he hadn't asked the right question. Then it dawned on him. That was superstitious thinking. It was wrong, and Grauwald had tricked him into it. Ludlov saw through it, though. He would trust the goddess, whatever she had in store for him. With renewed confidence, he turned the black token on his square.
When did you first wish someone dead?
He rephrased the short sentence. The question came as a shock. He wished he didn't have an answer to it, but he remembered it all too vividly. He was 10 years old, perhaps no longer an age to be catching frogs in the ditch, but it was a lazy summer's day, and he was with his cousin Hruda, who had come to visit. Hruda was the same age as Ludlov, but he was a more playful boy who still enjoyed many of the games which Ludlov felt he had outgrown. He regretted his decision to join his cousin on the frog hunt, though. Hruda had caught many more of the little creatures and couldn't stop boasting about it. Ludlov was annoyed, but he kept it to himself. Just then, fair Hildegard came along, the impeccably dressed daughter of a successful merchant. Hildegard was not only pretty, but a kind and generous soul as well, and she had caught Ludlov's attention some time ago. The summer sun brought out the charming freckles on her nose and cheeks, and she had the brightest eyes Ludlov had ever seen. His heart was easily kindled, and he knew that about himself, but he had already set his mind on marrying her when they were both old enough. When Hildegard asked the two boys what they were doing, Hruda began to brag again. Ludlov only managed to utter,
"Well, Hruda does have a bigger net."
Hruda laughed, saying that was true. His cousin was not only bad at catching frogs, but also at making nets. Ludlov angrily threw his net down right next to Hruda's feet. Hruda in turn kicked his leg and pushed him. He fell, face first, into the muddy ditch. Instead of helping out, Hruda threw Ludlov's net and the few frogs he'd caught after him. Ludlov crawled out eventually, cold, wet, and filthy. There were algae in his hair. Hruda was crying with laughter, and even though she was trying to suppress it, he saw a laugh on Hildegard's face as well.
"I wish you were dead, Hruda!"
Ludlov shouted. Then he ran home, crying. Later that day, Ludlov confessed to his father what had happened. Always strict but fair, his father told him to apologize to Hruda.
Wishing someone dead is grave matter. Don't imperil your soul for your pride, son.
Ludlov was still angry, and he was a stubborn boy. He insisted Hruda had the greater fault, as he had pushed him, while Ludlov had only uttered mere words.
Mere words?
His father had repeated. He'd sounded angry, and Ludlov didn't understand why. It was quiet for a while. Then something happened that Ludlov would never forget. He heard his father speak of his mother for the first time in all his young life. He told his son how his wife had once convinced him of the significance of words, how nations, alliances, and marriages came to be through mere words, and how the goddess had spoken the world into being. Magistrate Heinrich Ludlov was a hard man, who rarely complimented his son and was quick to deal with punishments. But as he told the boy about his mother, his words and his eyes were soft.
A true man of the goddess apologizes for his wrongdoings,
Ludlov's father told him.
Hruda may never become such a man, but I believe my son will.
Ludlov did take the advice to heart, but he was still proud. The weeks passed, turning into months, and the months turned into years. Whenever Ludlov encountered Hruda, he wanted to apologize to him, but he simply didn't have the heart. Hruda, for his part, only seemed to grow worse. His mean sneer triggered Ludlov's anger every time they met. They grew apart and seldom talked. 8 years after that summer's day when Ludlov had cursed his cousin, he received an invitation to Hruda and Hildegard's wedding. He threw it away.
Don't think. Talk,
Grauwald complained.
My cousin. I wished him dead when I was 10.
Why?
He humiliated me in front of a girl I liked.
What a silly reason to curse someone to death. Did something happen to him?
Ludlov swallowed.
8 years later, a few weeks before his wedding, he went on an errand for his ailing mother, my aunt. He took his horse and left, but he never returned. He was killed by robbers on the road. They stripped his clothes and threw his body in the ditch.
Poor Ludlov.
Grauwald said wryly.
You probably never got over it. Or did you run away with his girl after that? It was all very convenient. Couldn't have been a coincidence. I'm quite sure someone was listening when you made that wish. Demons are patient. Sometimes they give you what you want right away, but it could take 8 days or 8 years.
Ludlov bowed his head. He hated to admit it, but Grauwald was right.
See, in the end, we're not so different, you and I.
The dry Künstler said.
We both look for personal gain. The difference is, I go about it in a strategic manner. I know the demons don't care for me, but I also know how to give them what they want. So they give me what I want. You, on the other hand, you turn to your white-dressed cloud lady and hope your sad puppy eyes will do the trick.
Shut up!
Ludlov spat.
People die all the time. It had nothing to do with me. And you know nothing about the goddess. I confessed everything long before Hruda got killed.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. That's how it works for your sort, isn't it? You sin to your heart's content, but then you just confess it all away. How easy for you. At least I'm brave enough to admit I actually enjoy my sins. And it makes my life better.
I'm not the one hiding in a cave by myself.
I'm perfectly fine by myself, thank you.
Grauwald said in a good mood.
I would do away with that term, sinning, entirely. In fact, I would call it being yourself instead. I may not live in a walled city under the so-called protection of a school of hat-wearing fanatics who enjoy burning people, but I'm free to do as I like in here. I don't have to answer to anyone.
Not even the 3 autarch demons who gave you that power?
Grauwald's smirk disappeared instantly.
You're stalling. My turn to roll now. I'll let you go first into the abyss, as behooves a gentleman. At least you may rest assured I'll be following you of my own volition.
He rolled a 4, which landed his pawn a mere 3 squares removed from the abyss. Ludlov gave a sigh of relief. The odds were still somewhat in his favor. Although Grauwald had landed on a white token, he was almost at the end of his game. His next roll would most likely be his last. A home game.
Did I have a doll as a child? Grauwald asked.
Then he answered his own question.
Why, yes. I can't remember what the thing was supposed to resemble, a gnome or a koldar or something like that. But I do remember it had 2 different eyes, and I called it Gnarly. He was a mean little beast, but I tamed him. I had my ways, you see. I would treat Gnarly as if he were my little brother, and if I'd really had a little brother.
While Grauwald was rambling on about his toy, Ludlov thought about the stark difference between this question and the last one. He was grateful Grauwald had found a white token on his square. He couldn't stomach any more of the Dry Kunstler's disturbing answers. But then again, Grauwald could likely turn even the most innocent of tales into something that would make any sane person's skin crawl. When his host finally stopped talking, Ludlov took the black die. A sudden wave of primal fear washed over him. He was quite close to the abyss himself. Then again, a quick count of the remaining squares revealed that he was still 8 steps removed from it, and he could never roll more than a 6, even with the black die. Fear turned into excitement. The end was near, and freedom beckoned. He rolled and saw 2 pips facing him. He was relieved at first, but then he saw the glee in Grauwald's eyes. Frowning, he glanced at the parchment and realized his pawn was to land right on the square with the skull. His heartbeat quickened. There was nothing he could do now except follow the rules, and so he moved his finger pawn towards the skull. All the while, Grauwald's devious grin kept widening. Ludlov picked up the black token and placed his pawn on the square. Slowly, he turned the token in his hand and read the words. You die. Go straight to abyss. This didn't need any clarification. Ludlov stared at the black swirl with its blood-red eyes and its white fangs, and froze. Only now did he realize that Svensson had released him some time ago. It didn't matter. He couldn't move. Grauwald took the liberty to grab his finger pawn and made it jump from square to square like a happy little frog. At the last square before the abyss, Grauwald tipped the finger over and watched it roll into the darkness. Oops, he said, looking at Ludlov innocently. I'm afraid that concludes our game. Time for dinner. Ludlov had intended to figure out a plan while playing. And yet, even though the game had taken longer than he had anticipated, his mind had been so preoccupied with the proceedings that he hadn't thought of anything. Svensson was still right behind him, and in front of him was a Dry Kunstler, the most powerful necromancer he'd ever encountered. He knew he wasn't dead yet, and he shouldn't give up, but he couldn't help but feel desperate. Shall we celebrate your death? Grauwald asked, savoring the moment. I'm afraid I finished the wine, but I still have some flasks of liquefied bone marrow, should that strike your fancy. The necromancer came closer and looked at him the way a proud father would look at his little girl showing off her new dress. At last, you're mine. And as you know, I earned it fairly. He took Ludlov's hand and massaged his fingers, inspecting them closely.
I leave these for last. My favorite.
Ludlov clenched his fist and pulled his arm away.
Don't touch me!
Grauwald grunted in offense and had Svensson grab hold of the witch hunter again with one look.
I'd never taken you for a sore loser, Ludlov. I thought you were such an honorable man. You know I won the game fairly. We had an arrangement. You're not one to go back on your word, or are you?
A hate-filled glare was Ludlov's only response.
Under different circumstances, I would have loved to have a battle of stares, Ludlov. But right now, I'm hungry. The good news for you is that I won't be taking up much more of your time and start my dinner preparations.
Ludlov desperately tried to come up with some last-minute solution, but he couldn't think of anything. If only he could disappear, run to a place where Grauwald could never find him. But his legs were still too weakened. Svensson had pulled his arms behind him, and no matter how much Ludlov resisted, the remnant was simply far stronger than he was. Grauwald picked up the rope and started tying up his wrists again, slowly and almost gently, but still very tightly. The wizard let out a satisfied grunt with every pull on the rope. The rope burned into Ludlov's flesh. He had never expected to end up like this. He would be just another witch hunter who never returned from his assignment, another mission failure report, another empty chair in the mess hall. He felt bile rising in his throat as he realized he was about to be cut to pieces and devoured by another man. It all seemed so unreal, like a nightmare too terrible to believe. And yet, everything around him reminded him of the reality of his predicament. The pain in his wrists, the damp smell, the strange board game in front of him. Such endings were a liability in his line of work. He ought to have known and accepted that. Had he been vainglorious deep down? Had he somehow truly believed he was the goddess's personal favorite? Had he assumed she would always protect him from death? If so, why? He had seen so many good citizens die. Even those who prayed daily, attended the liturgies, and prioritized the goddess all throughout their lives, even they perished in the end. Whether the cause be an accident, a disease, or in rare and terrible cases, an act of violence. He had to believe that whatever happened, she would be merciful in the end, even if mercy only waited beyond death's door. Perhaps Ludlov's role in this world had truly been fulfilled, and he was never meant to expose the Black Sickle. Perhaps he dared to hope. His fate was now simply to meet Maria again. Then again, he doubted he was worthy of joining her, especially after the troublesome memories this game had stirred up.
Let's get down to business now, shall we?
Grauwald said. Ludlov's will to resist was sinking. Death was beckoning, and he was tempted to accept its embrace. He closed his eyes and thought of the friends and family he had lost. Memories passed by his mind's eye. His wedding. Long talks with good friends. He remembered the day he was ordained as a witch hunter, and the pride he had seen in the eyes of Blessed Zelenheim, a saintly priestess who had been a guide and counselor to him. She had believed in him so strongly. She was gone now, disappeared about a year after his ordination, and never returned. Some believed she had been murdered. The memory of his ordination day lingered. Blessed Zelenheim had brought him his hat during the ceremony. The hat he was wearing this very moment. The hat that had made him a witch hunter. By the maiden, he was a witch hunter. He had a job to do. Hübschdorf depended upon him. Tolfmann depended upon him. He was too weak to fight or flee, and screaming was useless. Stalling was his only option right now. If he bought enough time, help might still come. The odds were stacked against him, but it was possible. After all, he had sent out Fulcrin, and the bird did know the way to this cave. He only needed to get Grauwald excited about the subject. He needed to get the maniac to talk. A bargain would be ideal, but he couldn't think of anything to offer that might even tempt this powerful individual. Still, he had to try.
I want some answers before you eat me,
Ludlov demanded.
You lost,
Grauwald said with a shrug.
Losers can't make demands. You know me, Grauwald. I can't die in the middle of an unsolved case. At least grant me the comfort of understanding you. My doctor back in Seven Peaks always talks about how one's mental state influences the functioning of the body. Surely, it must influence the taste of one's flesh as well. Won't I taste better if my mind is put at ease? Frankly, I wouldn't know,
Grauwald admitted, apparently intrigued by the idea.
I think I never stop to think of comparing. My selected are usually very anxious when I consume them.
He fell silent for a while.
By Lucas's horns, Ludlov, you must be truly desperate to live for just a little while longer. I thought a religious man such as yourself would welcome the prospect of the afterlife. You know, I actually quite like you, Witch Hunter. I know I've been teasing you quite a bit during our game, but that was a game after all. If my desire to make you a part of me wasn't so strong, I'd turn you into one of my remnant slaves, so we could be best friends forever. It's a tempting thought, but I know someone as capable as you is destined to enrich my essence. If you feel some respect towards me, then at least grant me my final request. Just some answers.
Grauwald looked sad. Ludlov had the impression he was unlikely to give in.
I've been hungry for too long, Ludlov. I'll miss your company, you know. You've been an excellent opponent and a fine interlocutor, but I've simply waited for too long.
At that point, an idea presented itself to Ludlov's mind. After his death, Grauwald would be left alone, without anyone to join him in his game. Perhaps he would be open to a barter of some sort after all.
What if we turned this into a game? A final game, as a gift, from me to you. You'll give me the answers I seek, and I'll give you something in return. I've got weapons, boots, warm clothes.
Ludlov was thinking aloud rather than making any serious offers, knowing full well that nothing he listed would be very enticing to Grauwald. He could have offered him knowledge, but refrained himself. It might have worked, but he doubted the ethics of that option, considering his status.
I'll take all of those things from you anyway,
Grauwald said, gesturing towards an exit into another room.
I've got a whole chest full of apparel, including some witch hunter uniforms. If you don't have anything better to barter with, I'm afraid that concludes our negotiation, dear friend. My hunger can only be satisfied by eating, after all. However, as I said, I do enjoy your company. and wouldn't mind keeping you around for a bit longer. Perhaps we can meet each other halfway. What if you were to grant me a foretaste for every answered question?
Ludlov's eyes grew wide.
A foretaste? A part of you. I postpone your death, which is fun for both of us, but I already get to taste you. I've waited too long now.
A wave of nausea overwhelmed Ludlov as the implications of this proposal dawned on him, and he fell quiet. Such a bargain had never even occurred to him, even after all his time in a grim cave with a twisted man whose dark ideas might have started to rub off on him. The mere suggestion was sickening. However, Ludlov knew he had stretched Grauwald's goodwill to the limit. There would be no backing down from this. If he didn't accept this concession, Grauwald would simply kill him.
I'm a proud man. I would appreciate it if you spared those parts that are exposed.
Grauwald raised an eyebrow.
For now. So, you want me to spare your handsome face until after I've killed you?
Ludlov nodded and swallowed hard. He was a hardened witch hunter, but now he found himself having to fight back tears of shame and despair.
I will grant your request.
There was pity, even kindness in his eyes, which was the most unbearable part of it all. Ludlov averted his gaze.
It's a good idea, actually. This way, we can have a conversation while I get to munch on some bits of you as an hors d'oeuvre. It's perfect. Oh, Ludlov, I was so lucky to catch a noble martyr like you. You're everything I've ever wanted. I'll ensure your death is very slow, so I can enjoy every moment of it. But I'll see to it that it is not too painful.
Ludlov stared at the floor for a while, unwilling to let the reality sink in. Grauwald crouched in front of him. He took off his witch hunter hat and threw it on one of the chairs. Then he gently caressed Ludlov's hair.
So, what do you say? Do we have a deal?
Ludlov gave a reluctant nod. Grauwald walked away through the exit, and Ludlov heard him rummaging through some pots and boxes in the other room.
Perhaps you can already think about your first question.
The Dry Kunstler shouted. Ludlov's thoughts were a mess, and he couldn't even come up with a single question. He had never truly feared death before, but this cave had a corrosive effect on his spirit, and admittedly, on his trust in the goddess. When Grauwald returned, he crouched again in front of him, wiggling another small flask in front of Ludlov's eyes.
I want you to drink this. And remember, I can order you to, because at this point, you are mine.
Ludlov considered resisting. He could spit, bite, growl, and howl, but in the end, it would all be useless. Instead, he simply allowed Svensson to pull his jaw wide open and push his head back. The remnant was far from gentle. A cracking sound emerged from Ludlov's cheek, and for a moment he feared Svensson was about to tear his jaw right off. The pain extended into his skull and neck. Then came the cold, bitter fluid. His gag reflex fought the strange liquid invading his throat, but there was nothing he could do. He swallowed it all down in a few involuntary gulps. Then Svensson released his head. Ludlov coughed and felt close to vomiting, but he didn't. Panting, he sat watching the stone floor beneath him, holding on to the table for support. He had swallowed the potion, and it was only a matter of time now before he would experience its unknown effects. As he looked up, he saw a greyish blur where Grauwald's face was supposed to be. Black mist set in from every corner of his vision. His brain turned cold, and he felt his mind shrinking into oblivion. All he heard was a soft rushing, like a gentle sea breeze luring him away from this world of sorrows. The pain flowed out of his limbs as he surrendered to the quiet darkness. A servant of three masters. The first sensation to reach Ludlov's awareness was a sharp pain in the back of his skull. It seemed to emanate from somewhere within his brain. The rest of his body didn't hurt, but that was only because it was completely numb. He opened his eyes and saw the looming stalactites of Grauwald's cave painted in warm hues by the torchlight. Ludlov attempted to lift his head, but he found himself unable to. With great effort, he tried to budge his fingers and his toes, but even that didn't seem to work as far as he could tell. He couldn't even be sure of that since he was unable to see or feel his own body. The only part of himself he could control were his eyelids. A wave of panic rushed over him like an icy gale. He was utterly defenseless. He couldn't even tell whether his body was still intact. Turning inward, the witch hunter attempted to stabilize his breathing. That, at least, was within the realm of his abilities. This numbness wouldn't last. In time, his senses would return. He was sure of it. He waited, and eventually began to experience a stiffness in his neck and shoulders, as well as a surrounding coldness that vaguely suggested the sense of being naked. He had no idea how much time had passed and what Grauwald had done to him in the meanwhile. He prayed the madman hadn't already satiated his hunger. Grauwald's footsteps approached.
Ah, Ludlov, you've got your mind back, I see. That's all I need for now, in order to meet your conditions.
Ludlov tried to speak, but all that came out was a wordless groan. He was as helpless as a newborn infant, and entirely at the mercy of a mad cannibal. The implications of that were too frightful to consider.
In the meantime, while you were having your nap, I made some preparations already,
Grauwald said cheerfully.
I've got my tools right here.
He took hold of Ludlov's head and turned it to his right. Only now did the witch hunter see that he was lying on the ground in the middle of the cave. A campfire was burning nearby, the smoke rising up into a ceiling cupola. Grauwald was kneeling beside him. He was now dressed in a red robe, tied around his waist with a simple piece of rope. It gave him the appearance of a traveling monk under a vow of poverty. In front of the necromancer lay a bundle of cloth, which he quickly proceeded to unwrap, revealing a collection of objects that could best be described as operating tools. Each had a long handle, but they all ended in different implements. Some had prongs, others barbs or hooks, but every single one looked sharp enough to slice through the hide of an armored maceling. The sight of the gleaming metal edges was grotesque and terrifying enough to cause some involuntary spasms in Ludlov's muscles. He breathed in deep, refusing to give in to the terror. Quieting his mind, he wondered about his insane host. Was Grauwald simply trying to intimidate him, or was he genuinely acting out of some childlike urge to show his shiny toys to his guest?
You'll soon be able to talk again, and then you can ask me any questions you like,
the Dreikunstler said in a helpful, professional tone of voice. He brought a cup to Ludlov's mouth. Panicked, the witch hunter violently shook his head.
It's just water, you mistrustful fool,
Grauwald said. He pulled Ludlov's head up and poured some of the water between his quivering lips like a caring parent. Despite his host's scare, Ludlov still had trouble drinking. He could hardly swallow, and almost half of the water ran out across his cheeks.
Good. You did well. It wasn't easy, but you did well. Now, take your time, and as soon as you think you're able to speak, I'd like to hear what you wanted cleared up. Only questions that are to the point, please. No chit-chat about my favorite food, because I think the answer will be you. I'm hungry, Ludlov. Very hungry. Take it as a compliment that you're still alive. Nevertheless, I will know if you're just stalling. Give me real questions. For every answer I give, you will part with a morsel of your flesh. Less than a mouthful, really. I'll be gentle.
Ludlov tried to speak, but was only able to utter one syllable.
Wood.
Grauwald offered Ludlov the cup of water again. This time, the witch hunter accepted it and allowed the mage to help him finish drinking. He had to take small, careful sips and swallowed after every drop. Ludlov experienced a strange sense of comfort as he allowed himself to rely on his maniacal captor. In a way, there was a limited but undeniable mutual trust between them. Somehow, just as Grauwald had known that Ludlov would play his game fairly, Ludlov was now assured that Grauwald wouldn't allow him to choke in his glass of water, and he wouldn't have poisoned it. The witch hunter knew he was dealing with a brutal killer, but one who took murder seriously. For Grauwald, killing was an art form, and he took pride in his accomplishments. In truth, the last remaining distrust of the necromancer's integrity that still lingered in Ludlov's mind was simply conditioned by his training. His gut actually gave the man more credit. He was beginning to regain his presence of mind and sensed how the feeling in his hands and feet was returning. From his slightly more upright position, he managed to glance at his legs. They were still attached, and while Grauwald had stripped Ludlov's torso naked, he had at least allowed his guest to keep his breeches on.
I wanted to know,
Ludlov stammered after a long silence.
Why are you hiding out here?
His voice still sounded slow and stiff.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I understood correctly. Do you want to know why I'm hiding at all? Or why I'm hiding out here specifically? Assuming that I am. Second. Why here? The middle of Autarchs?
Grauwald didn't answer his question. He just looked at Ludlov, first startled, then troubled. Was he considering going back on his word?
Is this a blind spot? Do you fear them?
That's quite a lot of questions, my friend. I think I'm going to have to amputate an entire leg for that.
It's just one question. Why here?
Grauwald still refused to answer.
Answer!
Ludlov tried to raise his voice, but it came out far less powerfully than he had intended, and on top of that he immediately felt drained.
You promised.
Grauwald gave him a stern look and then slowly started talking.
This is the perfect spot. The center of the 3 layers, as you so brilliantly pointed out. It's the ideal place to practice my magic, since it comes from the 3 autarchs, and the entrances to their otherworldly realms are all equidistant from this place. Autarchs are very jealous, you see, and so this was the best way to keep them all appeased. From here, I can do the will of each and bring in souls for them. Of course, not everyone I consume can be claimed by the demons, but those who die in a state of separation from your heavenly tyrant are fair game. And that's enough of them to mollify my otherworldly patrons. Every once in a while, there will be a soul dark enough. I don't even have to look for them, really. I just pick the ones I like without paying too much attention to their eternal destinations. Which autarch ultimately gains the soul of a given sinner will be decided by a battle between the 3 of them. But in all honesty, it's not my business. I just use the power they've given me to ensnare souls for them without showing any preference to any of the 3 autarchs. That's why it's important I use all of my powers. If that answers your question, I think I'll have a bite now.
Wait!
Ludlov shouted, his voice gradually returning.
That doesn't answer whether you fear them or not, and whether this is a blind spot. That's all I wanted to know.
Grauwald grinned conspiratorially, as if he was perfectly aware of Ludlov's desperate tricks and enjoying them.
All right then. I'll bite, so to speak. Pun intended. But I'm going to need a bigger chunk of you as compensation.
He licked his lips as Ludlov closed his eyes and swallowed hard.
As for the answer, I have noticed the autarch demons prefer to avoid the confrontation with each other. They keep their distance from this place as long as I honor all 3 of them. They only confront each other to battle for a soul, and even then, they send champion reapers to fight for them.
Champion reapers. That name stirred up something in Ludlov's memory. Of course, he knew about reapers, the otherworldly servants of the autarch demons that were sent out to do their master's bidding in the mortal realm. He believed he had actually faced such a creature only last year. He hadn't realized it at the time, though. The beast had been extraordinarily powerful and very difficult to defeat, but still, even that, hadn't been a champion. There were only a few tales, written many centuries ago in the early days of the Inquisition, where champion reapers were mentioned. Great and terrible combatants, fighting for the glory of their masters in the netherworld.
Which of the autarchs will claim your soul when you die?
Ludlov asked.
More questions after a short appetizer. What do you think?
He asked, facing Svensson, who gave a mindless groan in reply. Grauwald's eyes scanned Ludlov's body thoroughly, the tip of his tongue dancing in the corner of his pressed lips. With his hands he caressed parts of Ludlov's upper body, rolled up his breeches, and inspected his legs before finally settling on his torso. Then he drew closer and breathed in slowly, taking in the scent of his bare skin. Under different circumstances, Ludlov would have been embarrassed by the stench of his own sweat, but he didn't care now. He felt numb. The nightmare he was living through was so unreal it made him question reality. Grauwald briefly tasted a patch of skin with the tip of his tongue, smacking his lips in satisfaction. Ludlov's stomach reeled. Then Grauwald straightened with a satisfied nod. He produced a very thin knife with a very long handle and a short but exceedingly sharp-looking blade. After careful consideration, he put his fingers on a spot underneath Ludlov's right ribs and pressed the tip of the strange knife into his skin, bouncing it up and down playfully. The necromancer took in the sight of his prey with the eager eyes of a child about to unwrap a present. He practiced for the cut by tracing a perfect square in the air just above Ludlov's skin. Ludlov's heartbeat increased when he saw how big the square was. He could scarcely accept the reality of what was happening. Soon he felt the tip of Grauwald's knife digging into him. The pain was faint and distant, but he was aware of the splitting of his own flesh and the blood welling out as the surgical wound was being inflicted on his body. He felt sweat break out all over him and tasted something bitter in his mouth, but the pain itself was bearable. Ludlov experienced a strange feeling of relief. Grauwald had chosen a spot that would normally remain hidden beneath his clothes, if somehow he was to survive. He would have to live with the scars forever, though. He closed his eyes and tried to even his breathing. To his astonishment, he even felt grateful to the Dreikünstler for honoring his request and picking a part of his body that was still numbed by the draught he had consumed. Ludlov suspected that Grauwald, for whatever reason, held some sympathy for him and wanted to spare him from the worst horrors. Then the witch hunter reminded himself that others hadn't been offered the same courtesy. His breath caught as he sensed the blade cutting deep into his skin, and a stinging sensation announced itself, which would no doubt turn into an excruciating pain once the sedative had lost its effects. The worst moment came when Grauwald finished cutting the square-shaped patch of skin and tore loose the remaining bits of flesh as he removed it. Ludlov squeezed his eyes shut and let go of every attempt to impress Grauwald with his stoicism. He felt tears well up from under his pressed eyelids. He took in hard, shuddering breaths, which Grauwald seemed to enjoy. As he held up the removed morsel of flesh, Grauwald couldn't restrain from licking it clean of the blood, which to Ludlov was the most hellish part of the experience so far. Grauwald proceeded to nibble carefully at the leathery skin square. When he had managed to swallow a tiny bite, the Dreikünstler said,
"My compliments, Ludlov. This barely needs any seasoning at all. But still, I'm going to heat it up over the fire. to see if you're even better roasted.
He gave Ludlov a gentle, grateful smile and walked over to the campfire. Ludlov dropped his head down on the cold stone floor in exhaustion, vaguely aware of a warm trickle of blood tracing its way down his torso. If he weren't sedated, his abdominal muscles would probably be burning with exertion from trying to see what Grauwald was doing to his body. Equally exhausting to his mind was the internal conflict between his dark curiosity and his sense of pride. Staring at the rocky, uneven ceiling calmed him down somewhat. Grauwald pulled him out of his mental twilight by addressing him.
So, you wanted to know whether I fear them, the autarch demons.
He was sucking Ludlov's blood from his thumb and fingers and licking his lips. The first part had been consumed, Ludlov thought. His relief evaporated when he considered the word first. Waves of nausea set in, and he forced himself to apply his witch hunter meditation techniques to overcome the panic, and also the shame and terror that assailed him from every corner of his awareness.
I don't,
Grauwald answered the question. He took his long, thin knife and started skimming Ludlov's body in search for another part of the witch hunter to devour.
Oh, you took quite a part of me just now. I'll need more information than that. Such as, what was your strategy hiding out here? I want to know. Very well,
Grauwald said pleasantly.
Like I told you before, Ludlov, autarch demons are very jealous. There is no need to draw their attention. As long as I can use their powers for my own gain, and that gain in turn serves them in some way, they're happy and they leave me alone. So, I suppose you are right. By nestling here, I did find a sort of blind spot. This location, and the border I installed around it, keeps me well out of sight from the villagers, the Witch Hunter Order, and the autarch demons. I created my own lair here, to carry out my own plans. I'm nobody's puppet. If that is what you believe.
Ludlov grunted to keep the rising pain at bay.
Demons are masterful at giving you the impression of autonomy. But in the end, you're always just a means to their ends. You're just another expendable slave to them.
Grauwald shrugged.
A slave is only just a slave if he resigns himself to that role. I know how the game is played. As much as they may despise me, loyalty is rewarded, even in the demonic realm, my friend. That's how it works. It has nothing to do with affection, and everything with practicality. The autarchs have little power in our realm, and so they need loyal servants to do their will. It's easy enough for them to reward that loyalty. Loyalty to a demon can buy you power, wealth, and, best of all, it can give you a chance to become more.
Grauwald stopped talking, but his expression betrayed that there was still something he wanted to share. Ludlov thought he could guess what it was.
What are you planning to do now? Oh, I've got big plans for Graunacht in Hübschdorf. Did you know the children put up a play in honor of me every year? It's true. Well, this year will be the last one, I think. It was a fine tradition, but now it's time for the curtain to fall, and all their little dreams to go up in smoke.
Ludlov swallowed bitterly.
Tell me more. No,
Grauwald replied simply.
I've told you enough. You may die now, knowing you were too late for the children of Hübschdorf. But don't let that sadden you, witch hunter. You'll meet them again, in that boring afterlife your priests are always going on about.
Wait, the witch hunter said, ignoring the provocative remarks.
Since you like games, perhaps we can play a guessing game to end our time together.
He noticed the resistance in Grauwald's eyes, but there was also curiosity. A cold stare and a slow nod were his only answer. Ludlov didn't feel so numb anymore. His speech had fully recovered, so he intended to keep talking for as long as he could stall this ravenous murderer. Maybe he could bluff himself out of this situation.
If I guess right, you could reward me for it,
Ludlov said in a strained voice. The pain was beginning to get worse.
How?
Grauwald asked.
I'm not letting you go, witch hunter. No, of course not. But you could just take a smaller bite next time, rather than an entire meal at once.
Ludlov tried to sound calm and grounded, but both his fear and his pain were growing worse with each passing moment. Grauwald only looked at him with a wary scowl, which pressed Ludlov to keep talking.
As an initiate, I went on a treasure hunt, you know. It was a historical find. Saved the city. Congratulations,
Grauwald offered flatly.
It was a treasure beyond our imaginations. And part of it was some of the possessions of Plinius Novacula. Ever heard of him?
Grauwald didn't react, and Ludlov went on with his tale, even as he felt one side of his torso burning with increasing agony.
To this day, no one knows what was in Novacula's chest. But I did learn quite a bit about the man himself in my studies afterwards. It was said that he was one of the most powerful necromancers of all time. And also one of the most ambitious. Goddess, what did you do to me?
Ludlov clenched his teeth and took a deep breath, trying to ignore what he was feeling and focus on the story instead. Grauwald's expression remained impassive.
They suspect Novacula was trying to attain something called dark descent,
Ludlov said, as he studied his captor's gaze.
Yes, Grauwald. Yes. The look in your eyes tells me you know what that is. He wanted to descend into demonhood. No one knows exactly what this implies, only that the rite demands that you die more than once, in very specific ways, prescribed by the dark laws. Plinius is said to have obtained that secret. Even though he took it to his grave, our order is still on guard. He might have shared his secret with younger necromancers or witches. And my guess is, Grauwald, since you've been around for a long time, Sancta Quintala, aid me. Grauwald, I believe you are one of those necromancers. You aspire to become a demon. And you're aware of what it takes. You're afraid the autarch demons will strip you of your power should they ever find out that you intend to become a rival to them. And that's why you're hiding out here. Like a coward. Like a coward.
Gathering all his strength, Ludlov bit down his pain and offered the necromancer a long, stern look in the eye. Grauwald met his gaze with unmoving, icy fury. Ludlov had clearly struck a sensitive chord. Then, the necromancer seemed to relax a bit.
So, what do you expect me to say now, Ludlov? That you're a clever boy? What are you going to do? Send a pigeon to the autarchs and tell on me?
So it was true. In a mere attempt to win some time, Ludlov had actually extricated a dark truth from the necromancer. This meant the man he faced was even more dangerous and evil than Ludlov had estimated. If Grauwald achieved his goals, there was no telling what he might do to the world. Somehow, Ludlov needed to kill him, and he had to do so in a way that wouldn't contribute to the rite of dark descent. Unfortunately, feeling his torn skin, his gaping wound, and the cold, hard floor underneath him more harshly every minute, Ludlov knew he was currently in no position to do anything to Grauwald.
Say, Ludlov,
Grauwald interrupted Ludlov's thoughts.
Do you ever wear short breeches when it's warm?
Never, Ludlov answered, only aware of the relevance of that question after his answer.
Then you certainly won't miss this part,
Grauwald said, digging the tip of his knife deep into Ludlov's left calf. The unexpected pain caused the witch hunter to scream. His voice, now fully regained, echoed through the cave. The part Grauwald had cut out of Ludlov's leg was smaller than the last, but thicker and longer. When the smell of blood entered his nostrils and he could sit upright enough to see the red splotches on the stone floor, the nausea returned. Ludlov pushed himself up and sat upright to keep himself from vomiting. The remnant that had been Svensson immediately pushed his shoulders down to keep him from standing up and running away. Grauwald took a prong. He skewered the piece of meat from Ludlov's leg onto it and sprinkled something on top. He proceeded to hold it over the fire for a while until it had changed color to a tasty brown. Then the necromancer stuck the back end of the prong in between two rocks to keep it standing up. Next, he took a cloth and ripped it apart. He lay a small piece on the wound in Ludlov's torso. The rest of the cloth was tied around Ludlov's leg.
You've lost enough blood for now. We don't want you to faint now, do we? Not now that we're getting so comfortable together.
Ludlov was too distracted by the smell of his own burned flesh and skin to think much of the gesture. Maybe if he hadn't known where the meat had come from, he would have liked the smell of it. It reminded him of pork. But then there was another, unfamiliar scent to it as well, one that made his insides squirm. Grauwald blew on the meat until he could nibble at it without hurting his lips. Then he gobbled it all down gluttonously. When he'd finished it, he licked his lips and Ludlov noticed him swallowing the last bit. He felt truly sick now.
Now, Ludlov,
Grauwald said with a smile, turning back toward him.
Surely a famous witch hunter should have a stronger stomach. Do you have any more questions left for me, or do I just finish the rest of you here and now? I must say, I rather enjoy eating with an audience. And, may I say, My compliments to your flesh. I have another question,
Ludlov managed to say, while fighting back his gag reflex.
It's more of a what-if question. But that's not against the rules, is it?
Grauwald thought for a while. Then he said,
Let's have it. Food always brightens my mood, so you're in luck.
Ludlov took a while to think about how he would ask this without making Grauwald angry again, but he had to try.
What if you died today, or in 20 years, or whenever, and the autarchs had to battle for your soul? Which of them do you hope will claim it?
Grauwald looked annoyed rather than angry.
I already told you I cannot pick a side. I have to remain neutral. So, I cannot answer your question. But you're well hidden from them, aren't you? And by the look of things, I'll be a pile of bones soon. Unable to share your answer with anyone.
Grauwald frowned. Ludlov was surprised how well this gentler approach seemed to affect Grauwald, so he pressed on. Grauwald was somehow interested in him, and even though he didn't relish the prospect, it might help him if he shared a bit more about himself to gain the necromancer's trust.
Ever since I joined the Order, I've become intrigued by the autarch demons. I met one last year, and... You met one? I had heard you had confronted one and somehow escaped. I wasn't aware of your rendezvous with one. Did you have a nice dinner and discuss the conditions of your leaving? No,
Ludlov said, happy he had sparked Grauwald's interest, but sad he had to revisit that moment in his mind.
I descended into an autarch's lair. Why did you do that?
Grauwald asked, still with disbelief in his eyes.
To stop the autarch's hold on a village. And did you stop him? Can I taste a part of you if I answer this?
Ludlov asked, surprised by his own joke.
Oh, yes. As long as I can pick the part. So, did you?
Ludlov had been a weak prey in the hole of a predator for a long time now. He concluded it was time to reclaim his dignity and get some respect from this deranged cannibal. If he had started to look weak, he needed to change this, and fast.
Yes, I did stop her, at least for now, bound in her realm. You're bluffing. No mortal can bind an autarch. I had help. With the right tools and divine aid, it can be done.
The look in Ludlov's eyes must have convinced Grauwald of his sincerity.
You're not making this up. Why, I must say, you do live up to your reputation, Ludlov of Seven Peaks. I'm quite sure that the next part of you will taste even better now. Not before you've answered my question,
Ludlov said severely, trying to exploit Grauwald's newfound respect for him.
Mieszog. You told me his name. You do realize that a witch hunter can command a demon if he knows its name, don't you?
Grauwald was unimpressed.
In all fairness, Ludlov, I don't see you commanding anyone ever again, let alone the Lord of the Flesh. Besides, I know full well that you need more than a name. You can't bind an autarch without white metal, and you'll never survive without something that grants you divine protection.
Grauwald was right about that, of course. If anything, Ludlov was surprised he knew all of that.
So, Mieszog. The flesh demon. I knew he would be your favorite. You seem to enjoy using flesh magic, and you've obviously mastered it well. Are you trying flattery now, Witch Hunter? Or are you actually starting to respect me?
Ludlov didn't answer and tried to keep Grauwald talking, as much to stay alive as to distract himself from the pain.
The entrance to his lair is in Ringborg, isn't it?
Grauwald nodded.
The legends about the Well of Souls are true. You have an attachment to Ringborg, don't you? Because of your wife? Is that what the demons told you? When you interrogated them about me? Well, if you're just going to answer my questions with more questions, we could be chatting for hours,
Grauwald said.
Time for a third course.
Ludlov felt a jolt of panic rushing through his entire body. He was fully aware now. If Grauwald started cutting him again, he would feel everything.
Don't look so shocked, Ludlov. That was our agreement, wasn't it? I answered your question, so I get another part of you. And I already know which one. It's caught my eye and watered my mouth for a while now. I want a part of your chest. That nice, thick muscle closest to your heart.
The cannibal looked at Svensson, who immediately pushed Ludlov down on the floor again.
You don't want me to cut too deeply, do you? So you better keep still and think about your next question, or there won't be a next one.
As the small razor-tipped knife drew closer to his chest, Ludlov's heart started beating so hard it might as well be trying to break out of his ribcage and escape.
Thank you for listening to the 8th episode of the Hounds of Hübschdorf, a witch hunter tale. We hope you have a great view there on the edge of your seat at the moment and are excited to find out how Ludlov is going to get himself out of this pickle this time, since it doesn't really look too good for him now. As we mentioned before, some chapters have been left out for the extended edition and give you an extra character point of view. This is an example of an episode that is missing a chapter called Shadow Lurker, which tells us what happens in the story through Tolfmann's eyes. You can get this extended edition on Patreon or on Bandcamp. Bandcamp is great if you just want to purchase the story. Patreon is for people who want to support us long term. You can even do this for an amount as little as $1. That would get us a store brand family lasagna a year, and as Domine mentioned, that will do it to get access to a surprise short story we recently posted by the expert creative hand of Jack Douglas Horn. This 40-minute mysterious short story is available for all paying patrons, including our guardsmen, and from the $5 tier on, you'll get exclusive merchandise. Make sure to check out our website, especially the page Support Us, for all kinds of free and alternative ways to help us create more stories. Special mention also for those who send us an extra appreciation fee for the holidays through donations. We are really thrilled to continue working on The Voice of the Vampire, and all of those sent us little helpings buy us a little bit more time to do just that. And since AI gives us the heebie-jeebies, we still work with old-fashioned brainstorming, writing and editing power. For those who already hang out on our Patreon platform, thank you so much for your support. It helps us cover the costs of all the sound effects, music and other hard-end software. Special thanks to Amy and Dallas Austin, Antonio Padula, Peter Strandkrone, Cody H, Jogot Oer, Matt Petain, Cameron Brantley, Tony Ranico, Liam Gabriel, Mix and Match, Caitlin Bourgeois, Kadir Hussein, Yiji Dusht, Gander, Osarion, Alu, Arno Teva, Ryan Stock, Jay, Rob Skinner, Tim the Gothic Horror Guy, Johnny White, Sue Morgan, Dustin Garner, Remy van Veen, and our newest patron, Maisie. Thank you, Maisie, for joining and for your wonderful comments on YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to do the same. If you're still listening and you're just not inspired, or on the contrary, if you are, write us something that rhymes with game. We've even received entire poems from creative souls on YouTube. Thank you for that as well. It's very entertaining. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. We hope to welcome you back next Friday during our premiere of the 9th episode of the Hounds of Hübschdorf on Podbean or here on YouTube, where we will be available in the chat. Once aired, the episode will be available on most podcast platforms. The next chapter has the very promising title Confrontation. Are we going to get a battle of wits, a moral encounter, a good old fist fight, a staring contest, a pistol duel, a wizard tournament, a Game of Thrones, or even a sing-off? Okay, I'll shut up now and I'll see you next Friday, hopefully. Bye!